Hello witches, and welcome back to Activist Witch, where we discuss witchcraft and activism. You can call me Isha, my pronouns are she, they, and in today's video, you get to ask a witch whatever you want. I set out to ask on YouTube and on Instagram, what would you like to know? About witchcraft, about activism, about Italy, which is where I was born and raised, about music, because it's what I used to do in a previous life, about everything really. You want to know my opinion on something or what I know about something? This was your chance, and you did not disappoint. Let's get into it. But before we get started, let me remind you that I've opened a Ko-fi, which is an alternative to Patreon that takes less from creators. And on there you can do a one-off donation, a monthly recurring donation, or even get a tarot reading with me, Italian style. The low-income option starts at £5. And for the foreseeable future, part of my profits from tarot readings go directly to support Kuches to Gaza, who supports Palestinian refugees in Cairo, and the Good Law Project, who is trying to bring trans rights back to the UK, because trans rights are human rights. So hey, if you decide to support me there, thank you so very much. I took a bit of a break because I loved doing Witches for Palestine Phase 3. We are already preparing with Imogen and Kellyanne Phase 3.5. Sit tight, we're going to bring it to you soon. But I needed a moment to rest and recuperate. And actually, I have a couple of questions about how do you balance it all? We'll get there. I'm going to follow on the questions that I got on YouTube, and then we're going to go on to Instagrams. It's quite a few, so let's get into it. I don't know what came over me about the makeup. I haven't done full face since May. I've never done full face in this channel. I've not actually done full face, it's just eyes. But my instinct to go to my eyebrows and swipe them out, it's... That's why autistic people don't have a good relationship with makeup. One of the many reasons why. The first question goes right into it, intersection of witchcraft and activism. Saida Govdes asks me, how do you recommend to someone who is actively integrating their witchcraft and activism not to feel overwhelmed by the sheer scale of how intersections work? Yeah, I feel you. So, best advice that I have on it is actually an exercise that I ask people to do when I do intersectionality training. And the exercise is you take a page and you write down the 5 closest people in your life that maybe are not your family. So beside your family with which you relate every day if you live with your family, but the people that you interact because you like them, not because you have to maybe, and 5 of them. And you write their gender, their able status, their heritage, their characteristics. And then you look at it and realize what marginalizations you don't have first-hand knowledge of because it's not in your inner circle. And when you see that, you can find out what kind of marginalizations and intersections you might not understand because you don't have a person close to you that you care about that basically informs your opinion. And that's not to say that marginalized people in your life need to teach you because it's not their full job. But when you have people around you, close to you, that undergo the oppression of the system, you naturally have more affinity because you understand how it affects them. It's not for them to teach you, but you observe it. And probably you also document yourself better because you care about them and you want to understand them. So when I did the exercise myself, I found out that the one demographic that I don't have in my close circle is cis, white, het, able men. Which honestly is the only demographic that I would say, it's fine. The world entirely caters to them. The world entirely tells you what they need and what they want. So you're good. But other than that, if you lack first-hand knowledge of someone with a physical disability, someone with an invisible disability, someone that is non-white, someone that is queer, someone that is femme, then possibly you actively not only try to expand your inner circle and your community, you listen to them a lot. That is to say that none of us are going to do the entire job themselves. To create these networks around us, though, allows us to learn from each other, share the burden, and move together towards liberation. So it's not just something that is going to be on you, but by expanding your horizon in the kind of people that you have around you in your community, you can support and learn from each other. And that's how you care for each other and care about those intersections, because it happens. You have the examples directly within your community, and you know how to most effectively play your part in dismantling the systems of oppression. Second question. I'm not really sure if this has to do with witchcraft a lot, but I keep hearing the prejudice and discrimination from northern Italians to southern Italians. Does this affect Italian folk magic in northern and southern Italy? How did it affect southern Italian culture and communities and the people throughout the years? Is southern Italy still facing a lot of discrimination today? I know it's a lot, but I'm very curious since my Italian ancestors came from southern Italy and I never knew the conflict of northern and southern Italy was intense. Okay. I told myself there's a beautiful video by Overly Sarcastic Productions that discusses the history of southern Italy. Southern Italy was an amazing kingdom and place, so multi-ethnical, so multicultural, so clever because of that. And then the Bourbons arrived from Spain, conquered it. Because it wasn't Spain, they very much neglected it. And so that became the poorer part of Italy, the less educated part of Italy, to the point that when Italy was, enormous air quotes, liberated by Garibaldi, unifying it in 1861, they were relatively happy to be unified to Italy. The division, how to concentrate the history of North versus South Italy in short terms. So once you watch that video by Overly Sarcastic Production, come back here, and in short I can tell you this. In terms of folk magic, it's not so much the split between southern and northern Italy, in the sense that Italy is a split village by village. Like, absolutely, the south is said to be more superstitious, like more traditions were able to be maintained by villages, whereas in North Italy, especially when it's around big concentrated cities, not so much in the villages, but in the cities, with the industrialization, the manifestation of enlightenment, they tried to shed any kind of superstition as lower. Because this kind of industrialization did not happen as much in southern Italy, because northern Italy were fuckers and just cared about themselves objectively, the, I guess, silver lining of this was that a lot of tradition remained without being squashed as much as in North Italy. However, and this is actually something that I noticed the last week, couple of weeks. I met my friend Sofia Righetti when she came to London, and we had an accidental Italian witches in the UK meetup, because my friend Freddie and his girlfriend Sarah, they are both Italian from different regions. Sofia is from another region again, I'm from a different region, so 4 regions of Italy represented at this table, and we started to talk about our superstitions. And Sofia, who was born and raised around Verona, which is a full-on city, they don't have as much the tradition or the superstition of the evil eye. And so Sofia was asking Freddie, who actually is family, is part of those lineages that pass the ability to read and dispel the evil eye. And so there was this confrontation. It was really interesting because I remember the evil eye being a thing in my village, despite the fact that my village is in northwest Italy. And I think the difference there is the urban centers versus the villages. And in villages, superstitions and traditions and folk magic resists better any kind of intellectualoid kind of effect that come usually from urban centers. I think southern Italy has more tradition, has more folk magic, and has kept more their roots in that, because that kind of urban center that strips everything out in the name of enlightenment was not as spread. Like in South Italy, you have Rome, which is actually center Italy, but the northern Italians will tell you that it's south. Anything under Bologna is south to them. It's not true. But also, why? How do I explain? My experience is very peculiar because I was born and raised in North Italy, but I am half African. I am half Arab, I am half Egyptian. So to them, I am lower than Southern Italians. One of the reasons why Southern Italians are seen as lower is that in antiquity, not so much even, like in the last 1,000 years, there were a lot of influences from North Africa, the Middle East, and that is an influence that is there also genetically. In the 1800s, these fuckers started to do physiognomy and eugenics studies on the fact that the traits of Southern Italian, if they reminded too much of black people, then it meant that they were lazy, they were prone to crime, they were prone to all the bad things because non-white is bad. I've made a video essay about that as well, about the beauty aesthetic and how Italy is insanely racist. I'll link that down in the description below. It's called Fat Phobia and Racism in Italy, but it goes in the culture as well. And there's a lot of the resentment, the hatred, because it's not resentment. It's not like the South has ever done anything better than the North, but they have this complex of superiority in North Italy towards the South that is still ongoing, unfortunately, indeed. And I go into that as well because it has to do with phenotypes as well, with aesthetic and all of that. So there's that as well. Also, I pointed out in a couple of the other videos that I do about Italy, there's this thing that is not well known. And there's this perception that after the Roman Empire, there was Italy as a country, as a state. There was not. Italy is 160 years old. The unification of Italy was done in 1861. Before that, it was city-states. It was different kingdoms, and the simple fact that then people shared language, not even that much, but they decided that Italy was going to be a country. 160 years is not long enough to create a national identity, and that's probably also the reason why, and I always say it, Italy has this natural, it's not natural, but they teach it to you as a child, this skepticism about everything and everyone that is not your blood and your family. It's incredibly problematic, if you ask me. And I genuinely think that that's anthropologically something that comes from the fact that we used to be city-states. City-states were small powers that within a battle could wipe each other out. And the people that were part of a city-state of Florence, of Bologna, of the Duchy of Milan, that kind of thing, when you had that identity, you were ready to find your neighbor invading you and destroying all you knew and being conquered or being killed. That thing hasn't left us. And that's why there's a term called campanilism, which has to do with the tower of the churches, which is a campanile. That is literally to deliver how small is the community with which people identify themselves as these are my people in Italy. In my village, 600 people, the level of infight that we did between families was scary, ruined lives. And at the same time, the way that your family of blood, whether they liked you or not, had to provide practical support and made you pay for it in emotional or economic terms, was also a thing of that, because you cannot allow your name to be dragged to the dirt, not because you care about the person, you care about the name. We care about the wrong things in Italy. We care about what people think, and that's an issue. There's one thing that I wanted to add about the traditions that happen in Italy that go by family. There's two forms of those, and because I know personally Freddie, who has it in the family, this thing about they pass on to you the gift to read and dispel the evil eye. Something that really consoled me, and Freddie explained to me, was that it doesn't have to be via a line of blood, because I carry extreme issue with anything that is based in blood. In my experience, I talked about it in the video about cultural appropriation. Anyone that talks about blood is trying to enforce a divine right for something that they cannot lay any claim to other than it's innate. And I carry issue with people that think that they can just have gifts like that, because when they want to have gifts like that, usually is to impose their power over someone else. When a family was passing the tradition through only the blood, so if you adopt a child, they cannot have the gift, you already understand what the issue is there. Whilst every kind of closed practice that is not based on blood that I know of, that is based on a shared struggle and experience. I am thinking of voodoo and hoodoo being born out of black people kidnapped and sold into slavery in America that unified with each other. Whether they were in the same family or not, they did understand their shared struggle. So when families do that in Italy, thinking to elevate themselves over their village, over their community, that is the catty, petty side of fighting with neighbors, where they try to latch themselves upon a power that they can say, oh, nobody chose, we were just given. The divine right of the kings was coming from the blood. That's enough said about literal privilege. So I do not believe in that, and thankfully I've been told that's not the case in a lot of these passing the gift. Like Freddie once said, I could pass it to you if we spend together Christmas Eve, because usually that's the night where the gift is passed. But that's the thing, and that consoled me a lot, because I was really worried that the kind of elitism, the war between paupers that we do in Italy, that would be reflected in our folk traditions to feel superior than our neighbors. I'm sure that some still do that, but thankfully not all of them. And the experience of Freddie, who is from southern Italy, consoled me a lot. Like, no, there is dignity in the understanding of the shared struggle. I hope that covers it. I will link Overly Sarcastic Production and my essay on the divide in Italy down in the description below if you want more information about that. How does one properly integrate witchcraft and being queer? I gave up. I'm trans, and so much of it relates to fertility and biology that I feel there's just no place for us. It's painful to engage with. I am so sorry that that's the first side of witchcraft that you stumbled upon. I have vaguely stumbled upon it. I've done 2 video essays about it. It's bullshit. This is not another way to describe that. I think the more I learn about witchcraft, the more I find out that it's innately queer. Queer in the sense of there is a standard and you move to the side and to the margins of the standard. So I am sorry that you stumbled upon that. I understand why that is popular. I think Wicca, which is what, like it or not, most of modern witchcraft comes from, because it was, the revival of the 50s. And that is very based, Dianic Wicca, from what I hear, it's very much based on the feminine and masculine, and that's actually based on sex, not on gender. No. But I do understand why a lot of people, again, much like I was saying before about the blood, a lot of people, especially when they're white, love the idea that something that they have innately, blood, internal organs, genetics, they love the idea that, oh, that gives me a merit that I didn't have to work with, I'm just chosen, fuck you. So yeah, I know that that's unfortunately a side of witchcraft. One, I have a reading list that literally puts together a lot of queering the craft, queering the tarot, so that's a point to start. On the other side of that, I'm trying to think, but the people that I have around, both digitally and physically, that are into witchcraft, also all happen to be queer. So I am sure that there's a community there to be made or to connect to. I'm thinking, my siblings in Power, where we do Wishes for Palestine together, Kellyanne Maddox and Imogen from Sapling Tarot, queer as they come. I myself am queer. There's an underground queer witchcraft community. There are a lot of books related to it. I'm thinking of Lane Smith. I'm thinking of Cassandra Snow. I am thinking of Charlie Claire Burgess. So I am so sorry that that's the first part of witchcraft that you stumbled upon. It's bullshit. Leave it be. There's a lot of good eggs. Also, Raven chimed in because they told me they feel the same way. So 2 things they brought up. One, because a lot of modern witchcraft, again, comes from Wicca, what is interesting and worth doing is contextualize Wicca for the artificial religion that was created by sexist men in a very sexist time, which is the 50s and the 60s, despite the fact that it tried to wrap itself in a tradition of Dianic cults based on the work of Margaret Murray, which has been discredited. It's not true that Wicca is the new form or the survived form of a long lost but not quite tradition of witches and witchcraft, that it's therefore so based on bioessential medicine. It's not. All of that has been disproved. But when you go and try to find something antique, you try to bring authority with it because it's lasted for so long, it must have validity. It's not. Wicca was created in 1951 by Gerald Gardner, who where do I start to list the faults of Gerald Gardner? They are around. You can find them. Not a good man in any way. And the 50s and 60s, again, more sexist than that. We're getting there, but seriously. So when you contextualize that and understand all the troublesome stuff of Wicca, and understand that, unfortunately, it's 70 years ago, a lot of what we still have, even if we call it witchcraft and not Wicca, tends to come and cite all those that were considered important books of the 50s, of the 60s. I think until Starhawk in 78 with the Spiral Dance, we did not have a book that stood against the benevolent sexism that Wicca was based upon, because Robert Graves and the White Goddess, because Gerald Gardner and all the work on Wicca. So when you contextualize that, I think it's easier to roll your eyes at it and understand. I'm not going to follow what a white man decided that he wanted to do, to dance naked with girls. So it's cool, it's fine. Second point that Raven brought to me, and it's actually very relevant, is do not think that you need someone else to tell you and teach you what your witchcraft practice needs to be. Because of course, like, especially the beginning of witchcraft, I remember it myself, I read a plethora of books, and 99% of them, after a while, I could contextualize them and say, oh, you're full of bullshit. I literally made a video about, oh, these are very bad books. This is one bad book, but there are more, and they will come. Actually, I have a question about that in this video. We'll get there. But when you ritualize your own experience, as a trans person especially, like, the first thing that I would think of if I was taking estrogen would be to leave my vials of estrogen on my Venus altar. It's that kind of thing. Like, the simple alchemical process of transitioning is magic in and of itself. So if you ritualize it and if you make it magic with rituals that make sense for you, that you can give value to because they make sense to you, that's your own practice. And I think that it's even easier to lean into it and to feel the magic because there's this natural exchange between what you do to align your body with who you are and the way that it comes back to you, and you infuse your intention and magic in these objects that then affect your body. Like, I don't think there's anything more magic than transitioning. So I think that it's completely your entitlement to put that into your practice, to maybe base your practice around that. Because you're more magic than any fucker that tells you any different. Which is also why, reproductive and bodily autonomy rights are intrinsically connected to trans rights, because it's about doing what we want with our bodies.
Yeah, like the failure of the divine feminine is that it doesn't take self-actualization or bodily autonomy. Instead, it does self-expression.
Yeah.
And self-expression is not the same thing as self-actualization.
Because what if you don't want to express within the limits of femininity? What if you don't want to express within the limit of masculinity? There's an entire spectrum, and those, as much as they tell you express it how you want, it's really still limited.
Yeah, it's the expression of autonomy, not actual autonomy.
Yeah, I hope that helps. Okay, oh, that's Jess. Doing activism as a spoonie/disabled witch, advice and ideas. Balancing self-care with community care is something I'm still figuring out, and I keep crashing badly. More talk about house magic beyond basic cleansing and protection. I love what you achieved with Vesta, but I'm not ready for deity work. I have so many more ideas, but some I don't know how to put in words yet. Hey Jess! So, first part. Something that Raven pointed out to me, and it's a mistake that I do as well. So I was like, I don't know what to say. And Raven was like, you have the same issue and you need to listen to your body. You have the pressure likely on you from not only the outside world, but I think even just being in WitchTube circles and communities, you see people doing things and you're like, oh, I'm not doing as many things. Should I do more? Maybe my practice is not valid if I don't do more. Or same thing when it has to do with community, like, should I go out more? Should I be more present? Oh, am I not being a good member of my community? Am I not helping out enough? And when your body crushes out, as you mentioned, it's kind of a message to listen to. And I was like, well, if you break, you cannot help anyone. I've talked about it before. One of the reasons why I started Witches for Palestine was partially my guilt in not being able to go to protests with my community every week here in Cardiff for Palestine. And I was like, well, I'm not there. What else am I doing? Why can't I help my community? And what I did personally was, what is something that is my talent that doesn't cost me a lot of spoons to do? And how do I put that to the service of the cause? And in my case, it was doing content. It was doing this. Like, I do this. I've done this for 15 years. I'm good. One of the things that Imogen Saplintaro is amazing at is admin, which might seem boring and everything, and for me it's really hard to keep on with. Imogen can do it. Like when I was asking them for quotes, to read me quotes, they told me, oh, to me it's a very low spoon thing and I can help you with. So it's genuinely just finding those things that actually are doable for you and can still be put at the service. But I appreciate that the capitalist mindset, I think that's the only thing, made us compare ourselves to others in terms of productivity. And remember, what you see here of me is what I film in an hour or two, one time per week. And maybe I've read a book, maybe I've done something. It's such a small part of what I do. And I might not do anything else with it a week. So this is to say, I personally love to consume content that it's about witchcraft as well. I watch Bente, I watch Saplintaro, I watch Kellyanne. But at the same time, I actually have got to a point where watching their content is kind of part of my practice, because it gives me idea. I put little pins in my head, and I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe one day I'll look into this. But try not to make that put pressure on you of, well, what am I doing then? Because I genuinely think that that's still the capitalist mindset that makes us compare each other in productivity terms, when that's just not healthy for anyone. And that's also not, we're not in a hierarchy, we're not keeping points, we're not winning or losing at what we do. We do what we can when we can. Also, if you're struggling to listen to your body, Raven gave me an amazing idea. Have you considered doing divination talking to yourself, as in to your body? Like there's journaling, there can be tarot, and you can literally try and find out what's crushing your body and how to actually take care of it and listen to the suggestion that it might give you, again, through tarot, through journaling, through that kind of divination. Pendulum, if it works for you, doesn't for me. It's that kind of thing, but actually going inwards, like check with yourself, do something that is self-care for yourself, because otherwise, like I know that at times otherwise I burn out, I crash out, and then I don't do anything for 2 weeks. Look at that now. I haven't done anything for 2 weeks exactly because I was too much. I've done too much. I just need to be an amoeba on my sofa. And that's fine too, because that's how you recharge. So find your ways to recharge, basically. And if the anxiety of, oh, but I'm not doing something in my practice, I genuinely think that, yeah, sometimes I have a hard time pulling my daily card in tarot, and sometimes I don't do it. If you want something more, focused on actually doing something, makes you feel like you're doing something about, like, sort of getting out of a rut or burnout, but moderately. This thing about checking with yourself through divination could be a thing worth attempting if you don't put the pressure on yourself. Well, if I don't do it then, because otherwise it defeats the purpose. Similar questions, but not quite, still spoony. Would love your spoony-friendly take and practical ideas on queer justice magic, from folk tradition to popular spells, because we need it. Much love to you, and Raven, get well soonish. Thank you! So slowly getting there. So something that, again, Raven made me realize is that something that we were doing that was bringing together very naturally justice, queer justice, and our witchcraft practice was accidentally falling into a community of spiritual, pagan-aligned. Some people identified as witches, some people didn't. We had a chat, and this chat was called a coven, and we would meet at Sabbats on the Wheel of the Year, which is peculiar because none of us were Wicca, and the Wheel of the Year is a Wicca thing, but hey, it was an excuse to meet up. And at all these events, we would do things to work together and to bring together our interests. It also helped that we, beside being witches, we were all involved in the queer community, in the activist community. We would meet each other at protests. A lot of us were part of this tenants association that is called Acorn here in Cardiff. So we all had different ways to be active or interested in activism anyway. And when we would meet, we would mainly the magic that we did together was activities that then had to do with some sort of personal desires or manifestation. So the first event that we did together was going to gather apples. It was September 2 years ago. We went to gather apples, then we went to the house of one of us. We boiled and cooked the apples and did apple-based recipes, stirring the intention in the various apple-based recipes: apple sauce, apple crumble, apple tart, pie. So, and that was the steering intention. And on Stara we did small planting pots with seeds, and so we did these little pots, and at the bottom of the pot there was an intention or a desire to manifest, covered with soil, with the wild seeds, and then you would water it and it would be with you for months until actually the seeds sprout. And the idea was like that with the sprouting of the flowers or whatever it was, one was a carrot for me. With the sprouting of it, so would your desire manifest. And admittedly, because we are all in the same circles, the desire would be, anti-war, can Israel stop doing what they're doing? It's that kind of thing. Also, I'll add it here, and then if there's another question. When I could go to protests, I used to do some kind of magic related to it. The first thing was protection magic, so I would make sure that myself and the people around me had a sprig of rosemary in their pocket, because rosemary is protective. So that was one thing. And the second thing was when we were marching and chanting, those are those situations where you realize that energy is real. You can't quantify it, you can't touch it, but you can tell that hundreds of people marching together, shouting the same thing, raises something. I think that something is energy. So what I used to do when I was going to protest was literally doing visualization and trying to direct this energy to an intention. And usually the intention was to protect Palestinian people. So I would literally envision the globe, where we were on the globe being here in Cardiff, and I would visualize this cone of energy going out and then circling around and falling onto Palestine and trying to be a shield on top of Palestinian people. I think it's also important to highlight this, because a lot of people have asked me about magic related to activism. I don't think you can do one thinking that it's the other. Better said, I don't think you can sit at your desk or at your altar, lighting up a candle for protection, for whatever, for Palestinian people, without following through with practical action. We say it for every spell, like when you do a prosperity spell, when you do a spell to get a job, then you need to send the applications, then you need to update your CV. I think it's important to highlight that when you do a spell for activism, then you need to follow through with action. And I worry that a lot of people might have washed their conscience thinking, I am lighting up a candle for Palestine, I've done my bit. No, even in our mundane magic every day, we know that there's a part of magic and there's a part of mundane. Materia magica is that, like, there needs to be a connection so that as above, so below. So when you do activism magic, then there needs to be something practical that it's related to. That's just my 2 cents on that. Oh, this question is amazing. Was Charlie Kirk really cursed by a Nazi witch? I will neither confirm nor deny, but I have put together a couple of posts about it on my Instagram. For those who don't know, 2 days before the event, Jezebel published an article saying that they had paid Etsy witches to curse Charlie Kirk. 2 days after what happens in Utah happens, and that day they actually have to publish an amendment on the article saying we condemn any violence. And then allegedly Metro, which is a UK publication, reached out to who they claim was the witch that has done this curse on Etsy, Priestess Lilith something, who made a statement. I'll link it down in the description below. I'll just say this, I think that it's very interesting that events of violence between cis, het, white, possibly right-wing men happen and people focus on witches. I think it's interesting. Don't you think? Oh, this was a very good question. It brought back such memories. I just read Utterly Wicked by Dorothy Robertson, I think. And it was full of cultural appropriation and bad writing. Books to avoid. Oh, yes, that was an experience for me as well. I think I read part of Utterly Wicked a month, 2 months into my practice. And I remember stopping because I got to a chapter where Dorothy Robertson talks about getting grave dirt, and she goes into a cemetery where there are soldiers from the South of the American Civil War. And I was like, this doesn't sit well with me because, you know, the South wasn't the good guys at the time. And I know there are video essays about it, about the romanticization of the South and of the noble soldier from the South, as if like defending slavery was noble. So I carry issue with that, and I stopped there. What I discovered months after was that another part that I read of the book that talked about accessing cemeteries, talked about an offering to bring to the guardian of the cemetery, which I realized months after, oh, she's talking about an Orisha. Aren't Orisha part of closed practices? I don't think that this applies to like everything. And of course, Dorothy Robertson did not, Dorothy did not mention any of it, like did not mention that Orishas are part of closed practice. And it's an issue that I've seen, and I've talked about it in my cultural appropriation video. It's something that modern witchcraft does a lot. And what I carry the most issue with, even on top of the issue with appropriation, is it costs you nothing to tell me where you found that information. If you were honest, you would tell me, oh, actually, what I know about Orishas come from this practice, from this book, or from this person that told me. You should find your own information through people that actually are part of this practice if they want to share. The most insulting thing that a white witch can do is take something from a closed practice, present it to you, packaged, and make you pay something for it, because Utterly Wicked is a book that you pay for. So yes, you're absolutely right, that's fucked. Books that are bad in that sense. I mean, I mentioned The Modern Guide to Witchcraft by Skye Alexander. Yeah, again, when a white woman from the US decides to write 15 books about everything, maybe she doesn't know much about anything. I carry issues with a very famous book, who I am so afraid of the backlash from that I am not going to mention. But that's actually how problematic modern witchcraft is. Dare I say this is the most currently famous book among witches. And I'll just leave it at that. Because I cannot risk incurring into the very practical, not even backlash, but I've seen that this person can be really personal about any kind of criticism. Because I had moved criticism against them, critique really, like saying, oh, they did this, it wasn't quite clear to me. Thankfully, I found this other book that said it in a way that I could understand. And this person, famous as they are, took it upon themselves to reply to me personally, clearly being skittish and bothered that I dared say I did not understand quite well their work. And it's an issue. It's a book that in the past I've talked well about because I genuinely was partially fangirling and partially afraid after I've seen the way that this person managed the critique. So, yeah, I personally found that there's still an issue. Like, we're not just talking about the days of Dorothy Morrison or Silver Ravenwolf. It's a current thing still. Personally, the books on witchcraft that I go by these days are part of that community that sort of inspires trust from me because of their actions in the world beside or on top of witchcraft. Again, Charlie Claire Burgess comes to mind, Lane Smith comes to mind, Kellyanne Maddox comes to mind, even if at the moment actually she is boycotting her own books because Watkins is involved with the genocide in Palestine. But yeah, I think it's very important before buying a book to research the author, and not only for credentials, because some of them have amazing credentials. I've been doing this for 20, 30 years, but where does their heart stand? And that's unfortunately down to you. You have to do that research. Also, any recent book reads or recommendation I'm always super interested in. At the moment, I'm not reading as much witchy books because I have to catch up on my feminist readings. Like, this year so far, I've only finished reading Caliban and the Witch, which is kind of... I don't read much because of dyslexia, but this year is really bad. What I'm currently reading is the Feminist Killjoy Handbook by Sara Ahmed, because I knew about it, but now Sara Ahmed is going to come to Cardiff next week, and yeah, I'm fangirling so hard, so I wanted to actually bring the book for her to autograph. I loved the name already, and now I'm finally reading it, which is really, really nice. I think other work of hers is more practical and informational on feminism. This is more practical. It's an handbook, so it tells you how to survive as a feminist in the world, what to expect, and how to deal with backlash and that kind of thing. If you want something more theoretical about feminism, probably there are books that are better for that, like Women, Race and Class by Angela Davis comes to mind. But yeah, that's what I'm currently reading. I had some plans for witchy books. Like, I don't say this proudly, but I haven't read yet 78 Acts of Liberation by Lane Smith, which I feel really bad about because I love Lane. Like, they are clearly an amazing person. I know of their book, but I've never sat down to read it. And now I'm going to be in a panel with Lane next week for the Critical Thinking Witches conference. I'm so honored to be part of it. And I'm going to be in a panel with Lane. And I know of their book, and I know that it's about activism and tarot, and I haven't read it, and I feel very bad about it. So probably that is going to be on my reading list. But hey, this is a good excuse to remind you, I have a huge reading list on my Ko-fi. It's free. It's just on Ko-fi so that stuff that I write, it's collected there. And also, if it's useful, you can leave me a tip. Hey, thank you. And before it used to be just books at the intersection of witchcraft and activism. That is still the main part, but now there are sections about educating yourself on Palestine, educating yourself on trans rights, educating yourself on fundamentals of feminism and equality, educating yourself on ableism. So all these books are there. I think I make a point of those that I haven't read back to back, but I know that they are worth it. And that's a good point to start, I think, for good books. Oh, this is Bente. Bente asked me, do you have witchy plans for the dark half of the year? When it comes to autumn, I naturally have the desire to do more ancestral work. It might be that, October, Samhain, that kind of thing. It might also be that, memory-wise, is the time of the year that I would spend a lot with my grandparents. I would be a lot at home with them, or in even our farm. And that's the time where they are not working the fields, or we are not out in the garden, which was really an allotment. So we are doing all that stuff in the house, around the stove. So I have this thing that I think I will try again to work with Ancestral Tarot. I read Ancestral Tarot back in 2022. It's one of the first books that I read. And I remember trying to do the first exercise to check in how your ancestors feel about working with you. And the first card that I pulled was the Ten of Swords. And I took it as, you're not ready for this, which was absolutely true. But, I might want to try again and see what the fields are now. Oh, my friend Lori. Lori, how did you know? How do you deal with bad actors and division in activist spaces? It's an issue that I have dealt with personally, unfortunately, and it's fucked up. There's not another way around it. I think in marginalized communities, there's this agreement between ourselves that the worst thing that one of us do still needs to be read under the lens of the oppression that being a marginalized person brings to you. Something that my colleagues in the Glitter Committee told me when we had trouble there was something that I don't agree with, but the idea of that, you know, if you come from trauma, racialized trauma, sometimes instead of trying to work on it and with your community on it, you just want to lash out. And you lash out at the people that are closest to you, and it's a problem. And you know, I'm trying to keep that in mind. That being said, I have dealt with people that are... I've seen bad things, let's just say that. And Laurie especially knows firsthand as well the things that unfortunately our community, the queer community and derivatives in Cardiff has gone through in the last year and a half. What do you do with bad actors? So some of my experience clearly shows that we haven't found a good way to deal with it. We claim that we're using reparative justice, but what keeps happening is that the most popular person that has the most friends or the most people that they can blackmail keep being in position of power. Within a marginalized community, as a marginalized person, it's very sad when the hierarchies and the methods of the system, which is a system of oppression, are simply acquired by the marginalized community and used like that. Like, the system doesn't work because of that kind of thing as well. So something that admittedly we might be doing wrong at the moment is that when there is a group, an organization, even a volunteer one, that wants to replenish their ranks in terms of committees, usually what happens at the moment is within a committee, someone proposes someone to add, and then the committee votes on it. Maybe if this voting was open to the community itself, that could partially undo the kind of pressure and nepotism that bad actors rely upon. And also, it should give term limits to people doing a certain job. So you are part of a committee for no longer than a year, 2 years, then there needs to be someone else that replaces you, just so you don't, even if while in it, something comes to you and you decide to start abusing your power, your time is limited. That is probably something fairer than what we're doing at the moment. At the same time, I do see the slight issue in then it still partially is a popularity context, because what if you're a very private person who still can do a lot of good? Like when I was brought into Glitter, I don't think that I was necessarily well known, but someone had seen my video essays, realized the wealth of knowledge that I had, and then therefore went, oh, when we need to do training and education for other organizations on matters of intersectionality, you already have all that knowledge. I see the issues, and also I will say this, in my experience, much more than in the capitalist world, when there are bad actors and people in bad faith, eventually they burn bridges themselves. Like, it might be why the popularity thing doesn't matter in the long term, because if you keep kicking out and playing Darvo and playing the victim when really you're abusing people, people start to not want to be around you. And technically, that's the most anarchist fairness that there is. Like, you can't tell me that I have no right not to want to be around you. You can kick and scream, but guess what? That's a boundary. Your boundary begins and ends with your body. I have seen bad actors in the community try and play the idea that my boundary is telling you that you can come into my spaces. And now, Your boundary is to decide where you go or where you don't go based on your limits. Recently, I've been invited at an event where a bad actor, an enabler, a flying monkey, so to speak, in therapeutic terms, was invited too. And I told the host, I cannot share space with this person because they have done damage to a lot of people and no amends were ever made. They clearly think just that enough time has passed that people will not remember. And I do understand that for easiness, some people are okay doing that. I personally, no, I don't give those kind of fucks anymore. If you do bad and you do not make amends and you do not acknowledge and you don't do reparations, you will be in my bad books until I die. So that's is it holding a grudge? No, because the moment that you actually are sorry and show that you are sorry, you are ready to do reparations, go around with a sorry pad, basically. Cool, we're cool. But until there's acknowledgement, I cannot trust you not to do that again. And so my boundary is not showing up in spaces where you're going to be. And let the people that invited me know I'm not there because of that. Because otherwise, there's also the risk that you're going to self-isolate because of that. No. It's your right to keep yourself safe. And that's the reason why I haven't done public statements on these issues. Even if I probably should have. Because the level of harassment that I've got personally was just, I have the energy that I have, and I decide based on that what is my responsibility and what isn't. My responsibility is to remove myself from these situations when it's just abusive, and when I'm asked or when there is a situation, explain to the people involved, hey, I'm not participating in this because this and this happened. These are my receipts. This is what I can do. So in the future, know that when these people are invited, I will not be there. That's my choice. And that will be your choice whether to invite me and these people as well. And that's the best that I could do so far. This is a very apt question to follow. How do you balance activism with self-care and mental health? Sometimes I take time off, clearly. Because there's this idea that, you wake up and your existence is activism, which in a way it is when you are a marginalized person. But there's also times that I just go out of the door and I want to go grocery shopping where I can't have my brain always switched on that. It's actually a point in the Feminist Killjoy Handbook. You can't always be the feminist killjoy because otherwise you also don't have the critical ability to understand when it's necessary for her to turn on, when it's a fight worth undertaking, and when you're just wasting energy on the street. So I do take lots of time off. I do dedicate my energy and make energy economy very, very attentively to what I do. I knew in this summer that there was Glitter Pride, which is our main event for the year in August. And the only event that I have done before that, knowing that I needed time to recuperate, was in June. So I've taken all of July off. For myself, I've still done video and all that kind of thing. But in work related to my in-person activism, I had to take a step back. And I was like, okay, if I want to do Glitter Pride and I want to be present there for my community, I'm going to need this month off so that I can gather the energy and go there. And then I'm going to need 2-3 weeks off after to recuperate energy. So it's a matter, surprisingly, very easily, it's just a matter of quantity versus quality. And I have to focus more on quality. I used to have this rule about I take only one engagement a day. So one day I just film and edit a video. One day I just have one meeting and so on and so forth. And that lasted until this January. I have been severely burnt out in the last couple of years. I think catching COVID last year again also didn't help because I suffer from long COVID. So it's mental health, it's physical health, it's how those two interact. So I had to accept to take a step back, and even my own rule of, you do one thing a day. No, you do a couple of things per week now, and you have to accept that that's how you live with your disability. It's taken me a lot because personally I have a lot of internalized ableism that I need to deconstruct, and I don't really have the understanding of, I could do this, why can't I do it anymore? I have a lot of denial on age, realistically. But that's work that I know I need to do. And so it's accepting that you need to take practical steps that are less imposing on yourself. And the pressure that I might get, from capitalist productivity and that kind of thing, I need to deal, and I need to deconstruct my own beliefs about that so that I can still bring quality to my community. Marcella, how are you both? And the cats? The cats are well. We're trying to balance them out because Artois had taken ownership of the upstairs rooms during the summer. She's very isolating, and I was like, no, you need to be downstairs. Also because if you're not downstairs, Stella's gonna eat your food, and you're gonna get too skinny, and he's gonna get too fat, and he's not gonna be healthy for anyone. So we're trying to balance that out. How are myself and Raven? How are you, my love?
Good. Stuart Lee was fun.
Huh?
I'm good. Stuart Lee was fun.
True. We went to see Stuart Lee. Very good left-wing comedian from the UK. I do recommend if you don't know him. I think there are specials either on YouTube or on the BBC iPlayer if you're in the UK. Good egg, good egg. I still am sort of recuperating from the phase 3 of Witches for Palestine, which was amazing, but there was a lot of stuff that required a lot of energy and movement, not just mental, but also the movement. Because I went to Bristol to do the talk, amazing, but that was, it's a lot. And then immediately the next week I went to London because my friend Sophia was in London, and we were there for like not even a day and a half. Thankfully, we stayed at Freddy's because otherwise the plan was to go and come back in the same day, and that's genuinely one of those things that my brain is still 20 years old and thinks, why should I be able to do it? And my body is like, bitch, no, we don't do that anymore. And I don't listen. And thankfully, I'm lucky enough that the universe aligns and my friends help, but I should be more careful about understanding my new limits and work within them rather than pushing myself to overcome what? You don't overcome disabilities. The world should. Social model of disability. Oh, no question. Just thanks for all your work. No, you're welcome. I'm very glad to hear that it's useful.
Thank you for the support.
Thank you for the support indeed. Another, no questions, but I'm a heavily vocal by Italian witch and I love your post. Oh my goodness, I am so well done. I cannot imagine being out and proud in Italy. Admittedly, I haven't lived there in almost 20 years, so hopefully things have slightly changed. Sophia tells me amazing thing when she goes to meetups of Non Una di Meno, which has different chapters I hear in Italy, so it's a feminist, trans-feminist group. So I'm glad to hear that it's getting better, but girl, I sympathize. Also, I use girl, indeed, the gender term in the gay way, like girl, but I need to change it, actually. I appreciate that. So, mate, I get it. Well done. I don't know how you do it, but I respect that a lot. Oh, that's a nice question. I love it. Someone claims witchcraft and witches aren't political. How should we educate them? Not to blow my trumpet, but I made a video about it, so maybe the first thing is to send them the link to my video. But I admit that in that video I am not necessarily very calm or very polite. So if it's someone that you need to lure in with benevolent education rather than attacks, I lose my patience easily these days. Because I am of a certain age and I'm fucking tired of Tom Police myself and people Tom Police me, when in reality it doesn't matter how calmly I say things. If they don't want to listen, they will not listen. So I've kind of lost that intrinsic politeness that I deluded myself into thinking, oh, if I bring things clear and calm with a bibliography, people will look into it and will see that I'm actually based in facts. No, they don't fucking care. So I might as well not care as well and just shout at them. No, not quite, but what to say then that witchcraft is not political? So historically they are wrong. Historically you can bring the witch trials. And the main thing that I mentioned in the video about witchcraft is political is literally the historical argument, like using magic was not the definition of a witch. There were magicians, there were esotericists, there were occultists. At the time of the witch trials, Cornelius Agrippa of the three occult books of Agrippa, which we still use as a foundation in witchcraft today, and William Lilly of Christian astrology, planetary magic, planetary timing, all based on that. They were men that wrote those books, that did occult stuff that still we use today, and they were alive at the time of the witch trials. Neither of them was looked at twice as being a witch. They weren't considered witches. There's actually a witch in America who was tried as a witch because she owned a copy of William Lilly's Christian astrology. So the man that wrote it in Europe, in the UK, where there were many more witch trials than there have even been in the US, he was never looked at as a witch. But a woman that was owning his book and doing, astrology around the village, she was tried as a witch. So witchcraft as a word, as in being a witch, not a magician, not an occultist, not an esotericist, a witch. Witch as a word was used as a behavioral threat, which was a way to oust you and marginalize you from your community, which was also decided that it was connected to the devil because the Christian church had decided so. The Malleus Maleficarum talks against midwives. So the connection, as you can tell there, immediately made the Venn diagrams of midwives and witches around the point of woman. 85% of people prosecuted for witchcraft, I think more actually, were women, as in the social category of women, not necessarily as the gender identity. So when they tell you witchcraft is not political, the word itself existed as an accusation politically to someone, whether they were using magic or not, that wasn't the discriminant. There was someone that you wanted to marginalize because you didn't like them. So it was the old woman that, was practicing and doing potions or whatever, or that you didn't like as your neighbor, so you said, oh, she cursed my goats, and that was enough to accuse her as a witch. So it had always a negative connotation, and it was always used as a behavioral threat of, you do something that is not in line with the status quo, I will name you a witch so that you will be prosecuted. None of that had to do with any practice of actual magic. The accusation did not have to rely on any practice of actual magic, to the point that the accusers could claim to have had dreams of this person doing magic. That was held up in the courts of law at the time as proof that this person was a witch. Did it have to do with them practicing? Not at all. You could make it up, say you dreamt it, and that was good enough to incriminate someone that you didn't like, basically. Tell me how that is not political. On a side note, the entire reason why we have modern witchcraft is because the Witchcraft Act was repealed in 1951. It was illegal to declare yourself a witch in the UK before 1951, which is the reason why Gerald Gardner could start the cult of Wicca in 1951. Indeed, I think the first books were 1948, 1949, and then from 51 they could actually declare themselves a coven, the New Forest Coven and all of that. Why? Because the Witchcraft Act was repealed. That is literally a law in politics done in Westminster. So those are the first 2 points historically that come to mind. Yeah. Ooh, Aisha, what's your take on basic universal income? Yes, but also we need to find ways not to just funnel it in the pockets of landlords, which is what's going to happen at the moment if we don't change the system. If universal basic income was brought in now, without changing anything of the system, it would just funnel in the pockets of landlords through all the expenses that we have to pay the bourgeoisie. We literally saw almost that in action during the pandemic, because people were put on furlough. People could not, for their safety, being out and about, which, by the way, the pandemic is still going on. It's not something in the past. But the governments have decided not to care about it anymore. Why? Because business landlords started to resent the fact that people not going to the offices meant that their business rents were not paid by corporations. That's the only reason why they declared the pandemic as finished. Not because we don't have enough cases. I think In the US currently there's 1 million new cases of COVID per day, but yes, it's not declared a pandemic officially. Why? Because business landlords need their business rents paid in their skyscrapers. So yes, UBI is one of the steps towards liberation, because you need people to be able to take care of their basic needs and dignities without the pressure of being rendered homeless, being unable to have food, like those literal basic needs. But there also needs to be almost Keynesian economics brought back at the very least, in the most right-wing way that I can think of, in the most right side of the left. At the very least, we need a hint of Keynesian economics brought back. I've talked about it in Capitalism and Cottagecore if you want to know what that's about. Exactly, because otherwise, as we have seen, the power consolidates at the top, at the 0.1%, and they own the market of everything. They own the real estate. And so if you give UBI now, it just goes back to the pockets of business landlords, and here in the UK, aristocracy mostly, because they are the biggest landowners and therefore house owners and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it needs to go along with a rehauling of the system, which basically taxes, dare I say, 100% rich people over a certain amount. You don't need to make more than $1 million per year, if you ask me. If you make more, everything, every red cent needs to go back in taxes. And so you can't make more money than that. So you cannot just accumulate while people cannot live. So you need an increase in social housing. You need a massive taxing on capital gains. Basically, we need a rehauling of the tax system in terms of not allowing people to hoard, because the tax system that is currently in place was based on the idea of income. Now most of the value is held in assets, so in real estate, in stocks, in the equity that you get in a house just sitting there, it just increases in values. So we need a tax system on assets, so that when something that you just hold and hoard, so that it increases in value, you get taxed on that value, whether then you use it or not. We definitely need a second property and over tax. Italy has that, and it has kind of discouraged land hoarding, as in landlords as a profession. Here, no, and we definitely need that. So yeah, UBI would help, but also we need to make sure that the entire tax system is rehauled, because otherwise it's just going to keep funneling up. What is your favorite or most often done spell and ritual? I have this. Since last November, I've been doing a spell every Thursday. And you'd say, oh, Thursday, it's a money spell. Well, it's under Jupiter. No, it's a spell asking that my benefits are not rolled back. I rely on benefits and on disability benefits to live. It's not a lush or wealthy life, but I've budgeted that my life and my spouse's life and my cat's lives are kept safe by this income. With the fuss that they have made in this country going after disability benefits, which is insanity. Like we thought last year that we got a left-wing government, and turns out that Labour has just turned Tory completely. So they went against trans people, they went against people that are disabled or that are working class, because they wouldn't want to tax rich people. So when that happened, I got scared. And so it's not a spell asking the universe to give me more money or anything. It's just what I have, keep safe. I just want this to keep coming. I don't want more. I'm not asking for more. Like if there's more, by all means. But yeah, just keep this safe, keep this coming. And I literally use I print out the documents that give me the entitlement to benefits. I burn them and I use these ashes around the candle that is blue, the color of Jupiter. And I light it up every Thursday, reciting a certain formula around it, which is basically like, keep me safe. And yeah, that's the spell that I do most often. And it's just so that I keep my income safe. It's not. I'm sure that people will say, oh, you don't have ambition. My ambition is to keep safe. Like, that's probably what differentiates me from the capitalist mindset, from the CEO witches. There's a video essay coming about that. Oh, you don't have enough ambition to think yourself, to manifest yourself out of poverty. No, bitch, I don't want to exploit my own community. Different. It's coming. Raven is doing an amazing research talking about the oxymoron that is saying CEO and witches in the same sentence. Yeah. I think it's the last question. Oh my goodness. Do you work with local nature spirits? First thing, since I started my witchcraft practice, the first thing that I started was actually going in parks and starting to recognize and identify trees, weeds, just so I knew what the nature around me was, because I knew very little of flora, even having been raised on a farm with my grandparents. Like, it's just not something that at that point was necessarily, like, I knew what a hazel tree was like because I used to steal hazelnuts with my grandmother. I knew what a peach tree was like because one afternoon in the summer, my grandmother just threw the stone of a peach in the garden, and the next year it just grew the entire tree. Because my grandmother was a green witch that way, seriously. You could give her a cutting or anything and she would make it sprout. But other than those things that were literally around me in Italy, I don't know much at all. Now I can tell you pretty much what any weed growing, even in the asphalt, in the tarmac, coming up, it is. Which I feel it's really nice. Like, it really gives you the idea of who your nature neighbors are. Mugwort is local to Cardiff here. I love that. I didn't know that. So I do that. I don't necessarily work in the sense of spirits, but I think what I consider spirits is not quite something that I consider myself having an attitude about. When I stopped the idea of a spirit as anthropomorphized, as an identity, as something that talks to me or that I should be able to see, when I started to let go of that, I started to notice that a lot of crazy things that probably are magic happen in my life, and I just think it's stuff that drops in my head. So there's a lot to fault the media for the expectation that they put on us of what magic looks and feels like. And the moment that you let go of that, I think you realize that there's a lot of magic going on that you just didn't think it's magic. It's just, oh, this stuff just drops in my head. I think I'm very claircognizant. It's the one clair that I probably have. I'm not clairvoyant. I don't see. I'm not clairaudient. I don't hear. I don't have the feel or the smell. But sometimes information just drops in my head. And I was like, oh, I wonder where that thought come from. Oh, well, that's useful. Yeah, that happens a lot. I live in Wales. Wales has a reputation for fairies. Mara Starling, the OG Welsh witch, has written a book called literally Welsh Fairies. Actually, that's what happened. Last year I went in North Wales to do a short film / documentary / art piece on, indeed, the Welsh fairies. And Mara was so nice that at the time her book wasn't out, she sent me an advance copy. And she had a charm to recite before you get into the realm of Gwyn ap Nudd, which is the king of fairies here in Wales. And after we did this thing in North Wales, we came back to South Wales, and I wanted to give an offering to the fairies, which I didn't do in North Wales. And I was like, yes, Wales. I wanted to give this offering because the footage that we got in North Wales, for some inexplicable reason, fairies, that specific file that filmed a specific entrance in a cave. Multiple files filmed in this cave.
Over multiple days.
Over multiple days.
On different SD cards.
On different SD cards.
All failed at this one spot.
All failed to film this one spot. So, the vague feeling was maybe the fairies didn't want us to film quite literally the portal that goes to them. At that point, that was the feeling. So, what I decided to do, coming back to Cardiff, was let's go to the, not quite forest, but the park, the forest side of the park that we have here, and bring them an offering. And I've read that cream is one of the things that they like, so I grab a pot of cream at the local shop, and we go to the park. And I think there was, I had misunderstanding about where the public park ended and the forest side started. And so I did not recite the charm to ask for the blessing and the permission to come in at the right spot. I was like, oh no, it's still too far from where I want to do the offering. Even if we're stepping off the main path, I'm not gonna recite it yet. The moment that I step off of the main path, my phone falls face down on a rock, the screen cracks. And so I recited the charm immediately. We went further in the forest until I found a tree that I had reason to believe it would have been undisturbed. I poured the cream. I think I also left like a croissant or something. Like there was something with, like there was the croissant and there was the cream, and I left it there. And I was like, thank you, sorry, thank you. And then we left. But yeah, then after a while I had to change my phone because that happened. And so, careful. Be nice, be respectful. Yeah, genuinely, we don't work with them because we wouldn't know what I'm doing, and I don't want to be disrespectful in any way and to risk stuff. Mara knows what she's doing. I don't. Hence. That was it. I think that was it. Yes, that was the last one. Thank you so much for watching this. I don't know how long it is. I really hope that it's not too long. Oh my god, can I split it into videos? We'll see. Thank you so much for keeping me company. I hope that this was entertaining, if not useful, and I will see you at the next video. And until then, I really hope that we can hack the patriarchy together, because there's need for it.